So without further ado, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Emma Newlands. I'm the Occupational Health Manager at Brodie's. If anybody hasn't really heard of occupational health or doesn't have somebody in occupational health who works with your organisation, really my background is nursing, with a specialty in terms of health, which is all around really supporting and advising business in terms of how health impacts both employees and business as a whole. So you can probably appreciate that over the last 8 weeks has been particularly busy, and as time has gone on, the wellbeing agenda has been pushed forward, which is superb for me. Unfortunately, it's quite challenging times for that to happen, but as I say, this is really an opportunity for people like myself to be able to speak to individuals, both from a business point of view, but also from an individual point of view about your health and mental health as well. So as you probably noticed in the last 2 or 3 minutes, I am going to probably find that I warble a wee bit, and I do find it quite difficult sometimes when I first start doing webinars that I use my hands an awful lot and I go back and forth. So for that reason, I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to leave you with some lovely slides, and we're going to go through that so you hopefully will be able to focus a bit more on the screen rather than on looking at me. Okay, so here we are now. First of all, in terms of what we're going to talk about is lots of different areas around wellbeing, but obviously there are some at the moment that are really impacting us both individually, but also as a business. What we're going to be looking at is really different areas in terms of looking at why mental health is very important at this time, but also why it's been affected. We're going to look at the impact that coronavirus has had across different stages of our lives. We're also going to reflect on the adjustments that we've had in the past 9 weeks now, and we're going to look at the common reactions that we may also be feeling, bad habits as well that we might be experiencing or notice that we've been adopting in the last few weeks. The importance of routine, and I'm going to give you a wee bit of tips around that in terms of looking after yourself. I'm going to touch very gently in terms of looking at returning to work, mainly because, as you can appreciate, I'm speaking from Scotland at the moment, so we are at this moment just waiting to find out if there has been any changes or alterations to this. I know that we're all obviously in different parts of the UK, so there may be different areas in terms of the COVID advice. But as I say, we're all still sitting here in our homes up in Scotland. So at the moment, we're just waiting to hear what's going on. COVID at the moment has been really difficult in terms of really the rate that it has come on board. I must admit, a few weeks ago, I can still see myself sitting at my desk in HR. One of my pals said, or one of my colleagues said to me, Emma, what do you think about this COVID stuff that they're reading about? And I said, typical nurse, typical medical background, don't worry about it. It'll be absolutely fine. Storm in a teacup, it will blow over and it will burn itself out the minute it starts getting warm. Well, here is my penance for saying that I have to do these webinars now, which are really affecting my own anxiety levels. So really what's happened is that when we look at mental health and well-being, the main thing that's come with this horrible virus has been quite a huge ripple effect, as you can appreciate. The main thing is that we are living in a time where we don't have that regularity, that settling in terms of our normal expectations within our day, our week and our month, which, yes, it was busy. We had issues around work-life balance. We had all these things that we talked about an awful lot within wellbeing and business. But we knew roughly what our expectations were when we were thinking about work and home. This is becoming obviously more of a challenge, and really what we are seeing is that mental health people who maybe have experience of mental health concerns, or actually people who've never had any mental health concerns or never really seen that as being an issue, are starting to see this bubbling up a little bit more. When I talk about mental health and a lot of well-being, when we train around this, I really do emphasize the importance in terms of when we look at ourselves and how we manage our own mental health. And to enable this to happen, I talk about the 3 C's a lot. This is all really about an individual being able to have these aspects of their lives, which are control, confidence, and clarity. Now, just want you to consider this for a few minutes. If you imagine these 3 C's as such, imagine a milking stool, and you've got the top of the milking stool, and you've got these 3 legs at the bottom. We need to have these aspects of our lives in check with us. So we need to have control, we need to have clarity, and we need to have confidence to make us feel, in some respect, normal, be able to understand what's coming, what's going to hit us, be able to deal with things that might sideline us. If you take one of those things away, so we take away clarity as such, which is a bit like what's happened at the moment, we don't know what's coming next, then we can find ourselves wobbling a little bit and the stool starts to fall over. With that, confidence starts to go, and with that our control goes. So if you think about those 3 aspects of our lives, if we add COVID into that, then this is why we're starting to feel a little bit uneasy. So let's have a wee look about how this has impacted us across the UK. Now, research really came out very, very quickly on the back of COVID and lockdown. Within the first 2 weeks was the start really of the UK coming out with some research around it, which was obviously a concern. So what we're seeing is that there has obviously been a massive impact, not only in terms of our individuals, but also in terms of the UK, but also globally as well. And it is following this pattern. There has been an increase in terms of anxiety, depression, negative feelings, obviously, massive amount of worries and concerns around things like finances, obviously employment concerns. We never even heard of the term furloughing. I thought when I first heard it, it was something to do with ploughing. So which goes to show my lack of awareness of these sorts of things. Women, what we're starting to see are women are likely to have a little bit more in terms of concerns. Now that might be traditionally, we do see an awful lot in research on mental health that it does look like that women, it may be because women maybe answer these questions a little bit more or can speak about it a little bit more, but there certainly is a trend finding that. Obviously there has been an impact in terms of staying connected with family and friends. This is a really big part of us being humans, and it is very difficult when that isolation is taking that away from us. Physical activity as well. We obviously are telling people to be physically active, but obviously you know that there is a correlation between being physically active and being mentally well. When we're not allowing people to go to gyms, we're not allowing people to socialise and to go and play sports such as tennis, golf, all these sorts of things, it can obviously have an impact. Isolation issues, domestic abuse, unfortunately, is on the rise. 25%, I think, is what domestic abuse charities are saying at the moment, the rise. Addiction, obviously alcohol, drug addiction as well, comes sometimes with being isolated as well. Suicide, I hate to say it, it is obviously a massive concern, especially in Scotland, where last year in 2019 we actually saw a 15% increase. So really it is a very massive, big mental health issue up in Scotland. Obviously as well, what has impacted across everything in terms of even looking at the logistics and the impact of COVID itself. So loss of loved ones, not being able to say goodbye, not being able to hold a hand of a relative, and that element of closure. As a nurse, that is a very, very important part of nursing, enabling people to be able to do that. And it is extremely sad if we don't have that opportunity to do that. What we also need as humans is to be able to have that feeling of being able to attend a funeral, to say goodbye. And if that is taken away from us, the biggest concern around that might be in the future having these issues that were not dealt with at the time. So, how have we coped? I think this is a really good thing at the moment, to be able to start to reflect a little bit on where we have come from. Obviously, at the beginning, we went into really a case of immediate response. We did what we were told. We went into lockdown. We pretty much ran with every single bulletin that was happening on a daily basis. And what happened then is that we went into a coping sense at the beginning. And this coping was all around dealing with the threat and the perception around a threat that obviously we were seeing in terms of COVID. I think what we must really do is appreciate how far we have come with coping. We have been able to adapt massively to being able to work from home. A small percentage of our workforce pre-COVID were working from home. Now look at where we've come so quickly in the last 8 to 9 weeks. We were literally at the beginning, maybe some of us still are, balancing laptops on our knees, on sofas. We had to obviously very quickly learn some new IT skills. I know that an awful lot of IT departments across business in the last wee while have really been working working their socks off to try and get people on board with different things, like obviously the Zoom call, which I've never even heard of, Zoom a few weeks ago, Microsoft Teams, all these things we've adapted so quickly to. We've adapted as well to family responsibilities. With that, we are, suddenly we have become teachers, we have become carers, we've become dog walkers. I don't think my dog has had so many walks in its life. So all these different things have really changed the way that we manage in the daily lives. We have been bombarded with news updates. I think all of us know really that we should really be trying to limit a little bit in terms of what we're watching on the news, and it is one of the things that I'll talk about later. But certainly the coronavirus, in terms of what it's done with social media, how it is being conveyed, and it is really important that we realise that we have to sometimes step back from that, because we are being exposed so much to different mediums in terms of learning about coronavirus, which can be positive and negative. So, common reactions. When we look at this slide, this is all really about where we have been in the last wee while. The problem with these common reactions is that these are reactions that, as a nurse, that I'd be saying to somebody who's probably suffering from anxiety or depression. But when we look at these now, an awful lot of our population are struggling with these different elements and reactions. I did a quick straw poll with doing webinars in Brody's over the last few weeks, and we looked at these different reactions. Then one of the biggest one has been difficulty concentrating. I know myself, when I sat down maybe to read a report or actually do a report in Somerset, it's taking me probably longer. I'm probably getting distracted an awful lot quicker, certainly making myself an immense amount of cups of tea, and breaking an awful lot more than I probably would have done before. Insomnia, we're not being able to sleep as well. We're seeing that as well in reporting and research as well, that as a whole, the UK's population is struggling to sleep. We're also having very vivid dreams, which is again, research is showing that can be quite common after things like trauma. There was a very interesting research piece that's coming out that is around the trauma that is very equal to what came out after 9/11, is very similar in terms of what our dream patterns are doing as well at the moment. An inability to relax, sitting down, not being able to sit still, not being able to concentrate, not being able to do these different things that we would normally be able to do normally, like reading or being able to sort of watch the telly. Our mind sometimes wanders or takes into account lots of different things that may be difficult to sort of stop and pull back into. Withdrawal. Now, a lot of people, we're telling people to isolate, but a lot of people, as part of depression and anxiety, will go into a sense of withdrawal. So it's a double-edged sword there. People are struggling a little bit with that. Increased use of alcohol and drugs. I know myself, we had to have a bit of a chat in our family, in terms of my husband and myself, in terms of how much we were probably pouring an extra glass of wine in the evenings at the beginning of the week. I did, I must admit, there's a funny story that came out from my mum and dad recently, but they were saying that my mum, they're shielding obviously at the moment, and they'd asked their lovely neighbours who've been getting them their groceries that if it's possible, if they could get a box of rosé for them, because I think they'd gone through their supplies very quickly. The two of them looked at the bag that arrived and could not understand why they'd been sent a box of roses, chocolates. So Dad's main focus over the past few weeks has been trying to find the button on his phone that does a little accent on the E, so he can make sure that he has his rosé supplies in the family. But on a serious note, there has been obviously this lack of really an ability to be able to be aware in terms of sometimes how much we're drinking, and it can sometimes lead into habit forming as well. Same again with drugs as well, the use of drugs. People are in isolation, they're not having to be shown, people aren't having to get up and go to work or have a sort of a routine in their lives, so that also is a problem. Irrational worry and anger is also an issue as well, and we're going to talk a little bit around that as well in terms of why we feel that, and I'll discuss with you as well things like fight or flight as well. So let's reflect. We've obviously come through this new routine as such, but I want to have a little bit, as I mentioned, about considering where we are at the moment. We are certainly, I think, over the honeymoon phase, and it's certainly settling. I think actually now we may be in the sort of separation phase, I hate to say, because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Scotland are in a different way of looking at things, and we are a little bit separated from our counterparts in England. Northern Ireland and Wales are doing everything differently. So it can be difficult to know exactly what our expectations are during the day. But what I would say is, let's start and look at what we're doing as individuals and within our family units. This is a little bit of you may have seen this on social media. This is a quote that is quite common around the importance of getting up every day. And this is all around sort of getting up, making your bed, feeling accomplished right from the beginning of the day, throughout the day, and then again in the evening going back to a bed that's been made. This was done by Admiral McRaven, who was in the US Navy and was speaking to graduates at the University of Texas. But I wanted to put it in again because when I speak to an awful lot of people who maybe are struggling a little bit, I do say to them, what's your routine like? A lot of people are saying they're falling out of bed, they're possibly in their PJs, they're logging on, they're having a wee look at their emails, and then their day doesn't seem to really get going. I am saying get up, make sure that you're up, dressed, bit of, at least brush your hair, make sure that you're ready for the day, and then hopefully that can start you off on the sort of making sure that you are managing. What I would also say is that this is important as well. If you've had a bad day, and we all have bad days, it's important at the end of the day to put that to bed, get to bed with the acknowledgement that tomorrow will be another new day. So, what we are looking at is different tips around those common reactions that we have been talking about. I'm going to start a little bit around looking at a good night's sleep. Now, this week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and you will probably appreciate that we are looking hopefully a little bit more about how we collectively look at our mental health, but also as we do as an individual. Up until COVID, the topic was going to be sleep, because sleep is an extremely important part of mental well-being. Obviously, COVID quite rightly has taken precedence, and it is now around kindness, and we'll talk about that as well a little bit later on. But I just wanted to highlight to you how important it is both to our physical and mental health. It is one of our red flags that if we do not get enough sleep, or if we have adjustments within our sleep pattern, it can be an indication that we may be having a struggle in terms of how we're going. What I would say is, first of all, just have a wee think about what type of sleeper you are. If you have children, sometimes I must admit, I'm aware that I've got one kid who's very much a night owl. I've got another one who's totally opposite in that and is an early bird. I know myself that I am very much an early bird. I like getting up early, but by the end of the day, I'm in bed early at the other end. Knowing what sort of is your normal as such can also be a good way of having insight into things change. There is a common term called sleep hygiene. I must admit, I'm not so keen on it. As a nurse, it sounds a little bit, not sure, I don't like the word hygiene, but it really is around trying to collectively get us to think about where it is important to really be aware of how much the environment around us and what we do to be able to enable us to get to sleep has in terms of the quality of sleep that we have. So look at your bedroom. Do you take your laptop in at night? Do you take your iPad? Do you take your phones into your room at night? You know you shouldn't be, so please try not to. One of the simplest things in terms of sleep is to buy an alarm clock if you can. Very cheap, just a normal old alarm clock. Get rid of that phone out of your bedroom. The reason for that is it's very easy if you have a phone that's waking you up in the morning to quickly have a wee quick look at the news headlines, looking at your emails, all these sorts of things. So your brain doesn't even get a chance to catch up as such before it even gets into the shower or gets going. Also, it can be easy as well to think, right, well, the alarm clock's on my phone, so I'm just going to have a wee quick look at my phone before I go to bed, before I set that alarm and turn off the light. So if you can, leave your phones outside your room. If you can't sleep, this is also a problem. People toss and turn an awful lot. But what I would say is, if you can't sleep, get up. Even just for around 20 minutes, it can be enough just to start to get over a little bit of the bump in terms of your brain being on overdrive. So get up, go somewhere else in the house if you can, read or do something relaxing. If you can, take some deep breaths. We'll talk about what that's going to look like later on. Well, also, if you can, don't look at your phone. Don't watch TV, as this can wake you up even further. Please don't go online, certainly. And what that can enable your brain to do is just distract and start that sleep routine again. What I would say is, if you're starting to feel tired, then go back to bed. I know it's pretty simple, and I know it's easy for me to say, but again, you can get into a spiral of tossing and turning as well. So looking on to sort of how we maybe have adopted some bad habits as well. Sorry, this slide is switched around, sorry, overnight. It wasn't like that last night when I checked. Sorry, I was just going to quickly say the bad habits that we're talking about. So working too much has been an issue as well when we've started off in terms of gaining that routine when we first went to work from home. We're not eating as healthy a diet, as I mentioned, about drinking too much alcohol, not doing enough exercise. I mentioned that earlier in terms of maybe not getting to the gym. We are asking people to get out and go for runs and things and cycles, but if you've not done that before, if you don't enjoy doing that, that can be challenging in itself. Staying up late as well can also impact our routine. I know from looking at the telly, I am really bad for hitting the Netflix and having a little look at, say, Afterlife, half an hour, I'll keep watching, I don't need to be anywhere tomorrow morning. So sorry, these are just different bad habits that have a wee think about as well. Hopefully my slides are behaving themselves now. There we go. So getting outdoors. This is another thing as well that I think is important. At the moment, we are thankfully being told that we can go out a little bit more than we have been able to. So we can go out and either exercise or even just go for a walk. It is so important for our mental and physical health, and that is why as the UK we were still enabled, we are allowed to keep doing that because they recognise that. What I would say is, it doesn't need to be a marathon, it doesn't need to be a massive big cycle or anything. What I would really emphasize to individuals is just please go for a walk somewhere that you can feel that you're within, somewhere that's a little bit more different than the environment that you've been in within your home. So that might be going to the park, even just going for a walk down the road, going around the block. The reason I've got these lovely yellow flowers is it's a nice little picture, but one of the things I would say is try and distract yourself. Look at different things on your walk. Try and get that brain into the sense that it's not rambling and trying to trip you off into thinking about COVID or thinking about something else that might be impacting you as well at the moment. So if you find it difficult to do that, focus on a colour. Have a look, say, for everything yellow that you see on your way around your walk. Have a look at, choose a colour of the day. The other thing as well is things like podcasts. Have a think around different things that you can listen to that are totally different from all the news and the negativity that we're seeing at the moment. So there are some really good podcasts out there that can be fun, that aren't really, hopefully going to, again, bring your brain round to going down those negative routes. What I'd also wanted to make a point is, what happens if you can't get outside? So some of us will have had shielding letters, which is along the lines of having an underlying condition that we really recommend that you don't go out and that you are obviously isolated, which is really, really difficult. That can have a massive, as we talked about, impact in terms of mental health. But think about it, if you can't get outside and you can't go and focus on other things, the four walls can very quickly start creeping in. So what I would say is, if you can, get to a window. I know it sounds really straightforward, but open that window up, take some deep breaths around, look at the sky, try and focus on different things, that you're not just looking at one area. So look at the clouds, look at the birds, all these sorts of things. Try having some flowers in the house, plants in the home. I must admit, if it's anything like me, You know, those plants may not be there after a week, but have something that you can focus on that is positive. Using apps that can also enable things like birdsong, sounds of the sea, so things like calming apps, and there is Calm, there's breathing space, all these things can also have a little bit that can trick the brain into thinking that it is outside. Try and get as much natural light as possible. Open up the curtains. I know sometimes we have to have them closed if we're on Zoom calls and things, but make sure you reopen them, and you also have them open as long as you can during the day. If you can, open up your, the front or your back door in terms of being able to sit outside. Some people don't obviously have a garden, so if you can, again, if you can sit on a step, take some deep breaths in terms of fresh air, hopefully, again, that will be able to trick the body into thinking that at least it's getting some sort of semblance of going outside. Keeping in contact with others. This is very much me at 9:30 this morning, and then by 12 o'clock it was a different story. So Microsoft, Teams, Zoom, all these sorts of things are all becoming part of our language. Again, we never really knew any of these things until over the last few weeks. What I would say is, remember, there is still a telephone out there, and some people really still appreciate just a phone call. It is important for you, and it's important from others. If you are struggling with anxiety or depression, it's also very good for you to speak to other people. So it may feel very difficult to be able to pick that phone up and speak to somebody, but what we're trying to get individuals to do is realise the benefits to that individual as well as the person at the end of the call. Consider as well the things that can be the different types of communication, but also consider as well how this can be challenging to some individuals. I know myself, I've just said to you, using sort of video can for me be quite difficult. So again, I don't always have myself on camera, but again, asking if you are in a business setting, asking people what they prefer. If you maybe work within teams, then maybe some days people don't want to turn the video on. That's okay. Set a goal as well in terms of maybe making sure that possibly at least once a day you check in with family or friends, or again with work that you possibly maybe have. I think a lot of people are doing this in terms of the work environment, but you are obviously setting at least a goal that you're checking in with a colleague or a line manager. Take the opportunity as well to engage. This is one of the things, webinars, things we never really had before that we didn't use as much. I certainly myself have been using webinars a little bit more to sort of gain a little bit more in terms of professional development as well, which is great, but also online groups, discussions, all these sorts of things can be really, really supportive at this time. What I would also say as well is, be honest. We find certainly in our family that we have been doing FaceTime calls a little bit more in terms of, speaking to our family as a whole. I must admit there are times on a Sunday evening, if I see my father's left nostril any more times, I am going to scream. He still can't get the blooming FaceTime to work properly. But I think it's okay just to say, look, we have got all these pub quizzes, we've all got these family chats, but there might be, again, sometimes that you just want a 5-minute check-in, and we don't have to have it so scheduled as well. I think there is a little bit of Zoom fatigue going on, so maybe every second week, maybe every third week, check in terms of the big stuff. But again, if we can try and keep checking in just individually, one-to-one, then that's really important. What I would say is, don't feel guilty if you want a little bit of quiet time. We are, again, getting things all from all sides. Microsoft Teams can suddenly flick up on your work phones. It can flick up on your home phones, FaceTime. Sometimes it's quite nice to be able to say, do not disturb. And that's for a reason as well, to be able to focus as well and not allow your brain to get distracted. So I mentioned about fight or flight very recently. So I am going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but I am going to keep it really simple. Okay, the reason for talking about fight or flight is it's explaining why the body has been coping in the way it has with things like COVID, and why we have been behaving in a certain manner. So fight or flight, to anybody who doesn't know, is all around a primitive response that the human body has right in its depth. It's a really good response to get us out of trouble, and it's great if you want to be chased by you don't want to be chased by a tiger, but if you want to get away from that tiger, it's superb. But we don't need to be responding all the time to that. The mechanism that allows us to do that within our bodies is really about a different set of systems that go flying off at different realms. So that is a chemical response mainly. So it's things like producing adrenaline, producing all these different hormones that are allowing us to be able to feel really quickly, to be able to deal with a danger as such. So then what that does is it pumps all the blood into our major organs. It makes our heart pump faster. It makes us breathe faster. It makes us be able to sort of put all our abilities into, as I say, getting those lungs and hearts to function really quickly. It can also allow our tummy as well to pull everything into our major stomach as well. So that can also make us have a wee bit of a churny tummy. Think about what happens though when all that blood rushes into the main organs. It makes our hands feel tingly. It makes things feel alien to us. We can sometimes feel a bit lightheaded. We can have palpitations. We can start to panic even more because our body is acting very strangely. Now, what happens within anxiety and leading on to depression is if you start to be in this state an awful lot of the time, the body starts to think this is normal. So it starts to produce adrenaline all the time. And it starts to have this feeling that it cannot calm down and it doesn't know how to calm down as such. And it goes into a feeling of being exposed to a threat constantly. So that's why we tell you to breathe. Adrenaline, and this is a really, really simple way, and I'm sure if there's any medics listening, they'll probably roll their eyes and say that's far too simple. But adrenaline is really, really important in terms of getting our body to respond really quickly, but it is poisonous. The way we get rid of adrenaline, if we can get this into our head, is through oxygen. That's why we tell you to breathe. You disperse adrenaline with oxygen. So take some deep breaths. If you haven't done this before and you think it's a wee bit sort of out there in terms of mindfulness and relaxation, it is one of the most simple practices that you can do without all the other fuzzy stuff. I'm not asking you to do yoga or anything like that, but if you can, please start taking some deep breaths. These are really quick fixes and it will allow the body to distract itself and to be able to calm down. So I have said about this one in terms of focusing on a room, standing up, in terms of looking at a different spot for 30 seconds, describe it in your head. If you find it difficult to concentrate, this is a really good thing just to pass the distraction on to something else. I also would say as well is that when you're thinking about deep breathing, I'm actually going to change this a little bit in terms of making it easier for you. I just came up with this in the middle of the night when I was worrying about doing this webinar today. So I'm going to call it 3, 4, and 7. So if we can breathe 3 times a day, so taking these 3 deep breaths 3 times a day, I want you then to count in for 4 and then out for 7. So 3, 4, 7, 3 times a day. Okay, and that allows all the oxygen to float through the body and allows you to hopefully think a little bit more rationally, allows you to relax and to be able to deal a little bit with those anxiety feelings. Try a little bit of relaxation, mindfulness. Yes, I know some people can find it a little bit difficult, but that's okay. If you find that, try and focus on other things like your hobbies. I must admit, we've got an awful lot of gardening going on in our house. I think my husband is going bananas. It looks like something out of Dobby's that I have produced into the utility room. But we're trying to sort of focus on things like growing things. And tonight, I must admit, I really am becoming very middle-aged because I'm quite looking forward to seeing Monty Dawn on the Chelsea Flower Show every night this week. So just do something in yourself that can maybe just allow you to distract yourself a wee bit. What I'm going to do as well is talk a little bit around the things that are really making us really challenged from COVID. So this is things like caring for our family, caring for dependents, caring obviously for our children. So I'm just going to touch on this just very gently. Caring for our family. Now, this is one of the most challenging, as I mentioned. Juggling our work and our personal time is really difficult at the best of times if we are looking after relatives and elderly individuals. Even within before COVID, I was very aware in terms of the occupational health side of things, is that some people come to that point in their lives when they have these extra responsibilities. It can be very, very difficult to juggle our work and looking after our elderly relatives. What I would say is, we know that the best thing to do is keep in touch. I know that, and that can be, again, as simple as that telephone call, even writing a letter. I'm going to have areas that I'll give you in terms of support, but things like age concern, Silverline are all out there to really be there and expecting levels of support, and they are there to help you if you need a little bit of guidance around that. We've been sending as a family some Moonpig e-cards, never heard of them before, but they have been able to brighten up some of our elderly family members as well. And these are really simple little email cards that we can choose in terms of different things. Lending a hand. Now, what I want to make quite clear is it doesn't always need to be you. If you are the main person who's been supporting an individual, try and have a think about how best to delve out some of those duties. We have gone into very much coping mechanisms over the last wee while. This is a time to enable us to reflect. Is there anyone else who can help? Are we having anybody in terms of looking at, possibly a rota with family and friends? A lot of people are desperate to help at the moment, and it's a human nature and need to be able to help. Allow that to happen. Showing that you care as well is, it doesn't need to be extravagant. We in our street have started doing sort of a weekly delivery in terms of a rebaking delivery. So we've gone around and also as well taking it in turns to be able to order some baking and deliver it to some of our neighbours, which is really lovely, and it makes you feel good. And also as well, there's only so much in terms of a lovely feeling of an almond croissant on a Friday with a cup of coffee. What I'd also make sure is thinking about people who are shielding. So shielding at the moment, as we mentioned, is really one of our main concerns in terms of an individual's well-being. We need to be able to think about what happens to those individuals when possibly, as the weeks go on, we start to return to work, and whether this will be an issue. It is going to be an issue because some people will feel left behind, and I really would emphasise that we really note down within businesses who is shielding and really offer an extra level of support for those individuals as well. I also want to mention quickly, and this is also in terms of the next slide as well, we are a nation, or we find ourselves as part of actually humans, that we do really start to feel quite guilty sometimes in terms of caring for individuals and family. And this really is a very negative emotion, but it's a very common emotion, both for looking after elderly parents and also looking after children. This really is something that we need to think about a little bit more. So it's common, but it really doesn't really help us as an individual, as a family. So it is one of the things that I would ask individuals to try and feel less guilt. And the less guilty we feel, the better it is, and the more able and acknowledging that to be able to support our family and friends. Looking after our children when we're at home. Now here's Emma, it should be 31 years. I wish I was 31 years old of homeschooling. I really do empathise with an awful lot of people who are dealing with this. I was saying just before we came on air that there's literally a tripwire at the moment for my kids out the door because they've been warned within an inch of life not to come near mum over the next hour. But it is really difficult to try and juggle all these different aspects of our life. We are not teachers. We certainly now probably understand and empathise with teachers so much more than we did. Goodness knows how you manage with a class of over 20. I'm struggling with even one of them. There's a hell of a lot of us, if you look at the statistics at the moment, of us trying to do this at the moment, and if you look at the impact across business in terms of where this is in terms of aspects of supporting these individuals that are working for us and how they are managing, it's really important to acknowledge that. Again, lone working parents as well, looking after children at home and trying to juggle their own workload. I think the important thing is just having a look at these wee bullet points. Having a set workspace is important. We are at the moment in our lives are juggling kids with different iPads. Anything we can get our hands on in the morning. The first one who gets onto the PC normally can stay there till lunchtime. So it is normally a little bit of a race to get all these different technologies up and going. Make sure you are taking regular breaks of rest and relaxation. The kids are outside, we're still trying to get them to go and take their breaks in terms of not so much a playground, but being out hopefully in the garden. Being prepared to adapt your routine, making sure that that there are days, as we mentioned, that are going to be worse than others. There may be days at the beginning of the day you look at it and go, great, I've got a run of things, I know how things are going, and then by Wednesday the whole world falls apart. This is normal, so do not worry about it. When your child needs you, take the time off and return later. The reason for that, actually, it's quicker to do that long term than it is just to keep putting it off and putting it off. Think about that concentration and how how you can get easily distracted. Being able to deal with one thing at a time enables the body to be put back into control again. Give yourself permission to look after your family. Look forward to sort of evenings of really down tooling and, watching the telly, playing some family games, all these sorts of things. So I must admit, I think I keep asking the kids if they want to play a board game, and they're looking at me with total disgust at the moment. What I would say as well is, don't be competitive. I found the first 2 or 3 weeks of working from home and doing this homeschooling that was interesting. There was some elements of individuals who became really competitive around sort of saying, well, we've done this much and how much have you done? Just do your own of what you can manage within your own family, and try not to compare yourself with others. Looking after ourselves. Now, I pop this in because it's really important in terms of our general well-being as well. As you will see, there are some really harrowing statistics at the moment around other areas of well-being, such as cancer, mental health, things like emergency treatment for heart attack, stroke. They are on the decline. So what we need to start doing is, you'll have seen in the obviously in the press, is that we are trying to support individuals in terms of knowing that they can get in touch with the NHS, and they must get in touch with the NHS. The worrying thing is that over the next probably 6 to 12 months, we will see a high rate of the impact of COVID, not only in mental health, but also in physical health, around things like, unfortunately, cancers that maybe have gone undetected. And this is the concern, that there will be a tsunami of such in terms of these areas. So please, please, if you have a concern around your own health, if you have a concern around your family's health or anybody within your family, please seek support. The GPs are still open. They have got still a phone service that you can use. NHS 111 is still there. And if you have any concerns, such as acute medical concerns, 999 is still there as well. So if it is urgent, it's urgent. It's our Scottish campaign up here. So please remember that. Returning to work. Now, I said I'd briefly touch on this. The reason I really will briefly is because it is moving so fast. At the moment, we are obviously, from my point of view, in terms of occupational health, we are supporting business in terms of how we get people back to work safely. But also, I think it's very, very important to acknowledge what the impact in terms of mentally this will have on individuals. And it's probably the first time that we may start seeing mental health and well-being being put within policies around return to work, which to me is positive. I know that's sad that we're going to have to do that, but if it is embedded within policy in businesses, maybe this might have a really positive ripple effect across the whole organisation going forward. What I would say is the research coming out of America, and also as well China as well, in the last week or so, is showing that there has been a massive rise in when people have come back to work in terms of mental health concerns, especially around anxiety and stress. We have to be able to acknowledge that since people have been at home, they have been probably dealing with some personal circumstances which have certainly come up and about in terms of people's lives. There may be financial aspects in terms of maybe people are facing redundancies within people's homes or being furloughed. It is again something that would impact us normally, but within the COVID ripple, as I talk about, it can really be a very big issue. Further change and lack of control as well. Those sliding doors are all over the place in terms of how we're managing to even get into work, get out of work. Some people are saying that we should be doing obviously public transport. There's issues around that, but then how do we get into work in terms of if we haven't been on a bicycle for so long and we're being told maybe we should cycle to work? All these sorts of things are playing on people's minds. We have seen in terms of occupational health psychologists have been indicating that there is like a post-trauma aspect response in terms of, which is actually quite similar to what the military have seen in terms of returning from elements of where they have been at war. So really these are aspects that we do need to acknowledge both within ourselves and within business. We need to consult with employees. We need to consult together in terms of how people feel in terms of their safety, and let people have that control back again that we talked about earlier. Those 3 C's, put that into yourself in terms of when you are returning to work. How much of control do you have that? And if you don't have an element of control, what can you do to enable that to happen that will make you feel a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more understanding in terms of trying to distract yourself, and in terms of obviously the bringing down those anxiety issues. I mentioned obviously as well, there's a little bit here in terms of a toolkit that is available, and I'm going to pop this on in terms of the resources. There's this fantastic toolkit that has been launched today. Business in the Community, CIPD, ACAS, and the Society of Medicine, Occupational Medicine have all brought this toolkit together in terms of looking at returning to work, not only in terms of logistics for our business, but also around sort of mental health and well-being in terms of looking after our support of individuals. What I would say is, I think when we are talking about returning to work, there are so many different aspects of so many different businesses. If we can, as an individual, just consider yourself and your own business and where you are expected to go. Try not to be concerned about everything else you're seeing in the media about maybe returning to, say, for instance, factory workers or manufacturing. If you're not involved in that, just be very blinkered in terms of what you need to do in terms of coming back to work, if you actually have to at the moment, because there will be a lot of businesses that will continue to work from home. Resources and support. These are different. Again, it will be a part of the recording as well, but I'll pop it, obviously, individuals in terms of resources that are available. There is so much in terms of the mental health charities that have got great support out there. There's Mind, the Mental Health Foundation at the moment. As you see, Mental Health Awareness Week is this week. It is all around kindness, as I mentioned. I think it's really important to have a wee look at that page as well. Maybe this week, if you can look through, there's 25 pledges in terms of kindness, what you can do for individuals around you at this time. Also as well, what I would say is do your own kindness, do your own self-compassion. Start now to have a think about what is important to you, what you need to do to yourself in terms of being kind. Starts with yourself before you can be able to radiate that onto other people as well. There is an awful lot as well in terms of support for Age UK. There's a lot in terms of looking after children as well. So if you haven't had a look at these, it's worth having 5 or 10 minutes just to click on some of these pages just to see what's there, because it's been updated all the time, and as well as everything's moving so quickly, they are keeping themselves updated too, which is great. On a positive note, I really want to sort of emphasize really the importance of, as I've said earlier, reflecting on where we have come, but also reflecting as well in terms of, let's look a little bit away from the negative aspects. Let's look a little bit in terms of how much we've achieved. Look at how we have, as humans, turned our attention in terms of our first basic human need, which is communicating with individuals. We have done that so quickly. We have moved so quickly in terms of what we talked about Teams, what we talked about Zoom calls. We have made rainbows. We have put origami across our windows. God knows how I managed to do that, but we did it. I'm not certainly a craft person, but I was quite impressed with myself in terms of doing that with the kids. We have spent time focusing on our community. We are buying local. We've been supporting neighbours and friends. Maybe let's hold on to that a little bit. You see it across Facebook, you see it across social media. It's coming up a little bit more in terms of, are we going to hold on to that when things start to go back to as such a normality? I don't like this new normal, because life will just be what it is, but there will be an element in terms of really reflecting on what maybe changes we could make, both in terms of our individual but also our families. Talking about Zoom calls, will I start maybe to Zoom my family and friends a little bit more that I'm not in contact with so much? Will I start to get in touch with people a little bit more in terms of keeping up that Sunday night Zoom call? Hopefully we can all meet together as well at some point. I think it's also as well, important to say that, we have spent time together as a family. We haven't had that commute. We have been able to, there's a picture of my dog, that's Lexi. We've been able to play with our pets. poor Lexi's going to have a terrible amount of separation anxiety when we all go back to school and work, because she's not going to know what's hit her. So it's being able to acknowledge that. We have clapped our hands in support. We appreciate people who have helped and supported us and have worked with us. It is great to see NHS key workers all getting that level of support. Last week was International Nurses Day. I don't know how many times I've stood as a nurse and said, do you know it's International Nurses Day today? And nobody's known. To see that being brought forward to the media was superb, and let's keep doing that. Let's thank the people around us who are there when we need them most. We've donated millions to charity. There's old Colonel Tom. That's a great example of where Britain and the UK has turned its attention in terms of supporting individuals. Obviously, the pub quiz, I must admit, if I do see another pub quiz, I am going to scream. So could anybody want to give me any other things? I think we're now moving into murder mystery quizzes as well, which goodness knows, we'll see how we get on. I think it would be great if we could just all get back to normal again. So I think that is, really pushing forward in terms of our own wellbeing agenda, and the agenda in terms of giving us a language to ask our friends and families and colleagues, how are you doing? Are you okay? Which has been superb to see. So really, I want to finish on the last note in terms of acknowledging that, the last few weeks have been really, really difficult. And this is a quote here that I really like, and I do refer back to it quite a lot in terms of when things do get out of control for individuals. And Michelle Obama writes that, we aren't always going to have a comfortable life. Life is not like that. We are humans. We'll all have curveballs that are thrown us. And we have all been, thrown the biggest curveball in the last few weeks. We can't always solve those problems, and we certainly are not able to solve all those world problems. But you must, as an individual, understand that we in ourselves, as individuals, have that great ability to be able to have courage. We have been able to have hope. And I think that there's an extra word I want to add into there: kindness. We have shown that we have been kind to individuals, and we are able to do that. So really, what I would say over the last last really sort of thing to think about when we're finishing here is that how important it is to look around you in terms of your family and friends and your colleagues, and just to be kind. So if we can maybe get the video back on again. Hopefully you're all still there. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry if it was a little bit warbly, but it's been really, really nice to see that everybody has come together to talk about well-being. If anybody has anything that is of real importance, as I say, in terms of mental health, as I say, please go and speak to somebody. Pick up a phone, even if it is a family friend, member, or your GP, because there are so many people out there that are there to help you in terms of your own well-being. But as I say, please look after yourselves, and it's been really nice speaking to you. Thank you.